Yeah, I was. Let's get into it. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to a special episode of Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies, the live video podcast for people who are looking for a deeper conversation about the films we watch today. Yeah, I'm going to revisit my previous take on 40 Acres. But first, please like, subscribe, and maybe ring-a-ding that bell. All right, that's enough of the bell. Anyway, let's get into it. Oh, and one more thing, folks. We're in the spoiler zone. I won't do the audio effect. It is what it is. We are. It's all spoilers today. All right. Yes. Here's a quick catch up. A couple of weeks ago, there's a link in the description. Jim and I took a deep dive into R.T. Thorne's 40 Acres. It's a post-apocalyptic thriller about a blended African-American, First Nations, Indigenous family trying to keep cannibals off of their 40 acres. So basically a zombie movie without the zombies, barely. Jim and I both gave it a soft see it. With me being a little harder on the flick, or maybe a lot harder on the flick than Jim was. But I've had some time to think about it, and I think I missed something important that puts the film in a different light for me now, even if my fundamental critique of it remains the same. But more on that later. Here's the thing. Sci-fi films aren't talking about the future. They're talking about now. And so, of course, you have to contextualize it. And in the words of my man, Frederick Jameson, always historicize it. So a film that takes this story premise that almost always has a white protagonist lead and instead centers it on a Black and Indigenous people defending their land primarily against a predominantly, if not all, white cannibals. You've got to think about the Black and Indigenous experience, not just in the past. And I've got a link in the description to an article on 48 Acres and a Mule, the history of that. But we got to think about the here and now. And Jesus Christ, this is the time here's the time we're in right now, folks. We just passed, the Canadian government just passed Bill C5, and I think Ontario has passed Bill 5, basically trampling on Indigenous First Nations treaty rights, our obligations, abrogating our obligations to them again for resource extraction, shamelessly using our fear of an American invasion to just, do more extraction. Basically, let's call it what it is, folks. Land. I think I got that right. Hope I did. And meanwhile, in the United States, all right, they're bringing back lynching. I mean, for sakes. For sakes. So it's in this context, hello, that we've got to, it's in this context that we've got to look at this film. And with this in mind, R.T. Thorne has actually made something pretty radical, certainly a lot more radical than I gave it credit for the first time we discussed it in my first watch through. It's a story, the characters who like a future, kind of a future early Black Panther Party saying, we're going to defend ourselves and what's ours. And I missed this when first discussed this flick with Jim. And I think that's really important here. Of course, some of it perhaps has something to do with my complexion. That said, doesn't mean I've changed my mind either. First, my critique of the storytelling remains. This flick takes forever to get going. It kind of misses it kind of beats the setup. But you know what? Again, link in the description. You can jump to or see it or skip it or even get into the deep dive. I don't think the storytelling is the greatest. But it's not bad. It was still a soft see it then. But more importantly, I still think the story premise, it's inherently right wing. Fundamentally, it's a barbarians at the gate, us versus them story. It assumes certain things like society can only collapse, an absolute collapse. It's a kind of an individualist prepper fantasy. And it's really ahistorical. Like, we've had terrible catastrophes that have happened in our past that we can point to. The Black Plague, where a quarter to maybe a half of the population died in a couple of years. Like, in a time where we don't have the infrastructure, the health infrastructure, et cetera, that we do now. Like, heck, post-war Germany, the Roman withdrawal of Great Britain, European invasion of the Americas. There are other historical precedents you can draw from to show that this is almost always kind of this weird sort of fantasy that is deeply part of American right-wing politics. It's very Mormon-esque, very apocalyptic. There will be an end. The hordes will finally overcome us all, right? And while R.T. Thorne does reference the Black Panther Party in this flick, I mentioned earlier I would call it the early Black Panther Party. The way the family practices it, I think would be criticized by later Black Party Panther members like Fred Hampton. And I've got a few article links in the description below. I think he saw, and we see it through his practice, his Marxist revolutionary practice, he saw the future in radical solidarity. He thought you could build a future in radical solidarity, organizing outside the Black community while working to strengthen it. And that it's that outside solidarity that also builds strength within a community. So, which is why I think changing the protagonists and maybe some lip service to, when a couple of folks are adopted, for lack of a better term, Manny can have a girlfriend. It's not enough for me to applaud the film without these qualifications. That said, I need to give it a stronger see it recommendation than I did before. Especially, I think, in choosing these leads and the way they describe them, it really does. I think it's also a great critique of the assumptions of this kind of fantasy. That said, I'll also, although I don't think it's intentional, I will also recommend, though, Love and Monsters. a flick that does, I think, challenge the post-apocalyptic premise in its own way, and perhaps a little radical in its own right. Although those have it's just a white protagonist. It's like, geez, are we ever going to see, any real kind of like indigeneity? I want to see one of those. All right. In a way, I think that is at least as radical as 40 Acres is. So yeah, I think that's almost about it. Of course, I will once more ask you all for a like, a subscribe, and a ringy ding of that bell. Thanks for coming out, everybody.